I'm Alex Michelson. This week, a very special edition of The Issue Is, reporting from China.
Nice to see you, Mr. President.
We're inside for Governor Newsom's historic meeting with China's president. The only TV camera on hand at iconic locations, testing technology, saving wildlife, and a basketball game the governor would rather forget.
It's been quite a week.
Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
Welcome to a very special edition of The Issue Is. I'm Alex Michelson, reporting from the Great Wall of China. We are here with Governor Newsom for the week, talking all things climate.
Then Governors Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jerry Brown took similar China trips, with Brown signing MOUs, or Memos of Understanding, with Chinese leaders to address climate change. Newsom came here as San Francisco mayor, but never as governor. He previewed this trip with us last month.
Unless the United States and China create a pact to address low-carbon green growth and establish a framework of engagement, despite all the noise and the back and forth, we're in real trouble.
I'm the only TV reporter that's part of the traveling California press corps. With credentials and equipment extremely limited by China, I have to shoot almost this entire show by myself on my iPhone, something I've never done before. Our journey starts at a crowded airport in San Francisco and a long trip to Hong Kong.
It's a 14-hour flight with a 15-hour time difference.
Once on the ground, we spend Sunday in Hong Kong, a chance to see the most densely populated city on the planet, home to more skyscrapers than anywhere else in the world. We sit down with Newsom for his first TV interview since his stop in Tel Aviv to visit victims of Hamas's war on Israel. The woman in this wheelchair was wearing a Lakers jersey when she was shot.
She survived because so many bodies were killed on top of her. And one body was on her leg, and it kept her from bleeding out.
The governor meeting with Israel's president and prime minister and shown horrific images.
To see the beheadings
You saw a video of a beheading?
directly,
Wow.
not just severed heads.
A much more upbeat tone Monday in Hong Kong.
Nice to see you.
Newsom visiting the University of Hong Kong, the top school in the region, talking about California's climate policies to a packed house.
Regardless of what happens nationally, subnationally, you have a partner in the state of California.
Tuesday morning, it's time to hit the road.
Our day is starting with a 3-hour bus ride out of Hong Kong. They call this their version of the Bay Area, and it's pretty spectacular.
As we enter mainland China, everyone has their temperature checked. We wait in what's called a health quarantine area, and then proceed with cameras everywhere. The governor mobbed by Chinese media at our first stop in Shenzhen.
Where do you see the
Checks out some of the 40,000 chargers powering the only all-electric bus fleet in the world. He gets behind the wheel of the latest self-driving hybrid from Chinese automaker BYD. It drives and spins itself and also floats like a boat.
I don't know why you need to do this.
Who needs a car when you can have a car and a boat?
Then it's off to Guangzhou for a meeting with their governor and the first signing of an MOU. Governor Newsom's climate advisor, Lauren Sanchez, helped negotiate these MOUs.
It's a formalization of a partnership so we can do policy exchange, people-to-people exchange, learn from one another in a more formal way.
All that is celebrated at a formal lunch complete with music. Recognize that song? It's California Dreamin' with a Chinese twist. After a walk around town, we're off on a flight to Beijing, the end of a 16-hour travel day that leaves me looking like this.
It's been a long day, but grateful to be here.
Wednesday in Beijing is the highest pressure day of all. It starts with an MOU. Then we head to one of China's most secure and most picturesque locations.
Newsom's meeting happening here at Beijing's State Guest House. This is a sprawling estate where they have multiple facilities and host their most high-profile guests with lots and lots of security.
A conversation about climate on one of the nicest days of the year. First up, China's foreign minister.
Good to see you.
Great to see my old friend.
Been a long time.
Then China's vice president. Before we head to the biggest meeting of them all.
This is the Great Hall of the People, where the president of China welcomes the biggest dignitaries in the world.
We're with the governor as he enters the building and a massive waiting room. Soldiers everywhere and music blaring, Newsom walks down the lengthy red carpet for a historic meeting with Xi Jinping. But we're not allowed to see it. That's me in the backpack. The Chinese government physically preventing me and all the American journalists from entering the room. Official government photographers, the only cameras allowed to capture the handshake.
China and the United States are the world's two largest economies.
Xi pushing for greater cooperation.
I don't think there's a more essential relationship. There will not be one more essential than the relationship we formed together, the United States and China, in our lifetimes.
Newsom leading with climate talk.
The challenge of our time, how we can change the way we produce and consume energy.
Afterwards, Newsom talking with us.
What is California, Governor, getting out of this meeting, getting out of this trip?
More tourism, I hope. More two-way trade, I hope. More economic development, more economic growth, more prosperity, more peace, more collaboration.
Newsom did bring up fentanyl with Xi, but not the human rights issue. He says he talked about that with China's vice president and foreign minister.
What do you say to critics who say that you should have brought it up with Xi?
Look, I can't be everything to everybody, every moment of every minute of every day.
1, 2, 3.
Thursday begins near the Great Wall, with Governor Newsom meeting 5 of his counterparts for a conversation about climate. Then we make our way to an unmistakable landmark, the Great Wall of China.
The word epic comes to mind. It actually describes this.
It's more than 5,000 miles long.
Does it make you think about infrastructure?
I mean, you can't not think about infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about how far we've come and, you know, how much further we're capable of going.
Friday morning in Beijing, another iconic location. Newsom receiving a private tour of China's so-called Forbidden City. Once forbidden to most of the general public, now hosting 50,000 tourists a day. The 178-acre Imperial Palace features some of the most impressive architecture of all time.
Which was the home of China for over 500 years, with 24 emperors living right here.
Put your own short moment in life in perspective.
This is my wife, Jennifer.
On this day, first partner Jennifer Seville Newsom arrives to add a new voice to the climate-focused trip.
Why is it important for you to come on this trip?
The climate focus and building bridges.
The Newsoms drawing lots of cameras to a public school where they check out the growth of healthy foods, similar to California's farm-to-school program.
Is this what you just did?
They also paint lotus flowers, symbolizing cooperation. Plus, a game of basketball, which doesn't exactly go as planned. The governor slipping and falling in his dress shoes right into a Chinese child, then tapping him afterwards in a playful manner. Both the governor and the boy were okay, and the governor would go on to sink a shot. Afterwards, he was clearly embarrassed by the fall.
I gotta work on my balance.
It's a smoother experience for his wife, who gets some impressive airtime in high heels.
I am so embarrassed. I was wearing my heels. Who does that? I swear to gosh, I think I sprained my ankle. No, it was really fun. The kids were super cute.
On this day, the governor also hosts a town hall with students at Peking University.
What's going on?
Lunches with the top environmental minister, and is celebrated by U.S. Embassy staff. Nicholas Burns is the U.S. ambassador to China and stood by Newsom's side for all his biggest meetings.
Governor Newsom saw the Chinese leadership. He was able to put issues on the table that were important for California and for the United States, which is why, from my perspective as the ambassador here, he helped the U.S. this week.
On Saturday, we traveled to the Jiangsu province for the most elaborate MOU signing of all. The walk down the aisle that feels more like a wedding than a bureaucratic event.
Have a photo together.
This area puts out more offshore wind than anywhere else in the world. Newsom inspired to make California's goals even more ambitious.
Real succinctly, more offshore wind is coming to California?
More offshore winds, and that's not a promotion, that's a promise.
Next up, we check out hundreds of red-crowned cranes. One bird leading the way on a walking tour of the Yangcheng National Rare Bird Reserve. This spectacular wetland, home to hundreds of species. Next, a ride on some of China's 26,000 miles of high-speed rail. far cry from California's system. We head to the spectacular city of Shanghai. Newsom mobbed at a chaotic party for California. Sunday, dancing cars welcomed Newsom to the largest Tesla gigafactory in the world. A California company making 2,000 cars a day, or one every 40 seconds here. The governor, an original Tesla owner, behind the wheel for a test drive. He puts the pedal to the metal, but says humans won't be driving much longer due to self-driving cars.
I think it's just going to explode, and you're going to start to see the driverless flying cars as well.
In Shanghai, Newsom wraps up the trip meeting with the California Press Corps.
I'm pretty proud of this trip.
At a time of growing tensions between the U.S. and China, we asked about the way China treated him like a national leader all week. From motorcades and shut down streets everywhere he went, to private tours of landmarks, to glowing state media stories, to meeting with the president himself.
Everybody's making a point here of the fact that we need to turn a page. And I think it's a very healthy point. I got kids. Directionally, there was an energy, and there's an opening, there's space, and there's desire so I just think we've unlocked something here.
Up next, our exclusive one-on-one with Governor Newsom. We're back in Shanghai, where it's time for my one-on-one interview with Governor Gavin Newsom. I'm setting up 3 cameras and 2 mics by myself for the very first time.
Governor, welcome back to The Issue Is from China.
Of all places.
Yeah, so we have spent the week together.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important takeaway for you from this whole week?
Well, I think the willingness for the Chinese to embrace the message, not just the messenger. We've been treated extraordinarily well, but the issue of climate change. They wouldn't have met knowing that was the agenda unless they were committed to doing more in this space. And I think that's reflective of the experience we've had this week, the fact that we signed 5 MOUs, and the fact that President Biden announced as we were here that he'll be meeting with President Xi in California in a few weeks.
Okay, so let's go into the Xi meeting, because that's the biggest meeting of the week. I was walking in there with you, this hall, which is like unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
And there's like trumpets blaring, and there's soldiers walking.
Yeah, they don't screw around.
What's going through your mind? Walk us through that whole
I guess
experience.
it was what I expected. It's a structure that exudes power and exudes place, and it's intended to be what it is. It was sort of overwhelming for any visitor. It's a home field advantage, I guess. I don't know what it's analogous to. Maybe
well, they say the Oval Office is the greatest home field advantage for the president when somebody walks in there, but I think that might have been more intimidating.
I think they're trying to replicate that. But again, there's a familiarity when you see people. I guess it is old adage, but you see people on TV all the time, like, I know you.
Right.
And then you have the opportunity to spend time with someone, and it was surprisingly relaxing.
So let's get into the meeting itself. The points you make to Xi, talk about climate change.
Yeah.
You also talk about fentanyl.
Yeah.
What'd you say, and what was his reaction?
Well, the meeting was niceties first. It was a lot about California. It was about San Francisco, how many times he's visited, 3 times. So just on the human side, just that softener. And then we got into the issue, the reason I was there, around climate change. And he knew that. He was certainly prepared. He was well aware of where we were in our previous journey, at least the previous days, and where we were going next. And then we transitioned to fentanyl, and I told him personally, this is, it's the #1 killer of people 18 to 49 in the United States of America. It's taking 1 life a day in the place that I hope you visit in San Francisco at APEC in a few weeks, as we transition to the formal invitation, of course, to APEC as the host state governor. But it was an interesting transition, and he was very prepared for that part of the conversation. Well, even though there was no preparation in advance that I would bring that up.
You didn't bring up the issue of human rights directly to President Xi. You brought it up to the foreign minister.
And the vice president.
You know there are folks on both the left and the right who are disappointed by that. You clearly made a strategic choice to do that. What was your thinking there?
Well, we're with the foreign minister who was in the meeting with Xi. I spent an hour with the foreign minister And that was the appropriate venue on the basis of the conversations I had with the State Department and on the basis of the fact that that would be a better place to communicate a more nuanced and detailed explanation of our points of view on the issue of human rights and democracy, on issues related to Taiwan, issues related in international and foreign policy more broadly. And we took the limited time we had with Xi, which we were told would be just 20 minutes. And we had the opportunity to extend it to 45, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity in those 20 minutes to reinforce the reason I was there. Not as President of the United States, not as Secretary of State, but as a governor of one of the largest states and one of the largest economies in the world, to focus on low carbon green growth. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity and moment to influence this foundational agenda, which is bigger than any situational agenda in our lifetime.
I mean, some of the thinking, if you do that, he goes like this and he's not open to anything else.
I had an opportunity to talk about the most important issue in our lives. It's the most important issue. Yeah. Everything else is situational. This is the most sustainable issue. It's changing everything. And what happens is our mind gets so short-fused on the situation that we miss this foundational shift in our lives. It's changing geopolitical politics, changing the way we live, changing the way we breathe, changing our health patterns, changing our wealth patterns, changing migration around the world. There's no more consequential issue in the world today, long and medium term, and increasingly short term, than the issue of climate change, as important as all those other issues are.
Are you concerned, though, that some of those images of you may be used as sort of propaganda by an administration that a lot of people see as repressive and communist?
Well, I mean, I was here 3 prior occasions. You had a bipartisan, you had Republicans and Democrats here just a few weeks ago. Senator Schumer was here. I imagine the same would be said at those meetings. The same will be said about the meeting President Biden will be having with President Xi in the state of California. It's the nature of life. You can have a closed fist or an open hand. You could turn your back, you could deny that we live on the same planet and that we have a mutuality. I mean, the number one trading partner, tourism and trade, and we haven't recovered from the pre-pandemic tourism, and that's hurt our restaurants, our hotels, our retailers. I want to get that back. So we have 2 million Chinese Americans living in California. I come from San Francisco, a gateway China, the first and largest Chinatown. I want to get back to that. And look, at the end of the day, with all due respect, I don't want a new Cold War. I don't want to go to war with China. I mean, some people I think really do. I mean, it scares the hell out of me. Think about that. I mean this. We got to soften the tone and tenor here. And that was the reason I came. I couldn't take the rhetoric.
You know, some of the criticism back home is that China feels like a world away from being back home. And they would rather see you at home dealing with homelessness than here in China. What do you say to those people?
I don't know, 24/7, 7 days a week, homelessness is the number 1 to number 10 issue. That's all I focus on up until literally the last minute I left here. At the end of a legislative session, signed unprecedented housing and homeless bills, including in Los Angeles specifically, an order of magnitude the most significant mental health reforms in California's history that we'll be placing on the ballot. Taking a few days after a legislative session when the entire legislature is on vacation or out of town, after a remarkably successful year where we were able to focus on those issues in nuance and detail, to advance the cause of climate and partnership and trade and investment in our state. So I think it's a pretty good use of time.
When we come back, how Kobe Bryant impacted Newsom's meeting with China's president. Tensions were eased a bit during Gavin Newsom's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping when Xi brought up his 2012 visit to Los Angeles to watch the Lakers and see his favorite player of all, Kobe Bryant.
What a great way to level set in terms of a serious meeting, a serious moment in the relationship between our respective countries, and talk about Kobe Bryant. I mean, and he talked very fondly about that visit to Los Angeles. And I also made a point, and it's a point of pride for me, about the Warriors, not just the Lakers.
So Xi's a Kobe fan?
I mean, that's well established in this meeting. Let's just leave it at that. We want to make him a Curry fan as well.
Okay. So big picture, when you, just to wrap things up, when you think about this trip and you talk about it, with your kids, you look, but this is the kind of thing that you remember for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
What are the images, what are the things that you'll remember most from this trip?
Well, look, I don't want to, I've said this to you before, and I say this to my myself all the time because I want to practice what I preach. I don't want to dream of regretting. I don't want to say I could have, should have, would have. I don't want to say, in 4 or 5 years to my kids, we turned our back on China and all of a sudden now we're at conflict and we're, potentially sort of these regional wars, God forbid, trade wars, economic war, military intervention. I mean, just think about that for my kids. Think about all of us. What kind of world is that? So I keep saying, have an open hand, not a closed fist. And for my kids and grandkids, I hope they'll look back at their dad or grandfather and say, you know what? At least he did everything he could when he had the opportunity.
Well, you had an open hand with the president of China. You had an open hand literally with cranes. And,
That's true.
Fed them
amazing.
With an open hand.
I know, who knew?
So I'll reach out my open hand. Say, Governor, thank you so much.
Great to be
Appreciate
back
the
on.
time. It's been a hell of a week.
It has been.
Up next, a few moments of fun at the Great Wall.
Wow. This is wild, wild experience.
We wrap things up with a brief break from work at China's Great Wall during an 18-hour workday.
In between those serious conversations, we did pause 5 minutes for something fun. A toboggan ride down the mountain. Wow. This is wild, wild experience. I did it in my suit, colorful socks and dress shoes. Woo! Here's a look at part of my ride where you can see the wall at times. It was a hell of a ride. I wasn't the only participant. What'd you think?
It was amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. How fast were you going?
About 70, 80 miles an hour.
Now to some final reflections at China's best-known landmark.
What is your big takeaway from this trip?
Well, tear down the walls, and reconcile our differences at the end of the day. I mean, this has symbolism, but it also is part of a past, and I don't want this to be the future. I mean, I don't want us to keep erecting walls like this into the future, and I think that's fundamentally what this trip is about. I've said this 100 times, divorce is not an option. This wall, I think, is about the